Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to USITT's Collaboration Conversation, where we explore the collaborative partnership between director and designer. I am Yolanda Williams, USITT board member, and your host today. Today, I would like to welcome director Alejandra Cisneros and lighting designer Anthony Aguilar. Today, we will discuss the impact of director and designer and how they have an impact on the creative process in doing projects. Okay. So, first, I would love for them to give just a brief introduction, a little background about who they are and the work they create.
Hi, I'm Alejandra Cisneros. I go by she, her pronouns. Just a quick visual descriptor. I am a light-skinned Latinx woman with curly hair and a bun. I'm wearing glasses and a shirt that's red and white. And I got two posters in the background on a white background. And we're calling here from Brooklyn, which is the unceded land of the Lenape. And I direct and produce. So I'm going to pass it on to Anthony here.
My name is Anthony Aguilar. I am wearing a shirt with orange slices and lemon slices on them. I'm visually, what else? I have black hair. I'm 5'11". I have a mustache and a little bit of a beard. And and I'm a lighting designer and I also am a playwright and an occasional actor.
Okay. Brooklyn, New York. So it must be cold. Well, coldish.
Cold,
It's
yeah,
cold. It's cold.
Yeah, it's cold.
We're from the West Coast, so it's cold.
Okay. Oh, so it's really cold for you all.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you again for being here. Let's go ahead and dig into it. Tell us about how you started working and collaborating together.
We started working together at a theater where it was a small community theater that was in a storefront in East LA.
Called Casa 0101.
And Anthony was a writer, and you were doing some designing there?
I started off working the boards. There I was doing lighting boards, sound boards at the theater. At the same time, I also wanted to be a writer. And I originally came in as a writer, and I kind of fell into design. I think going into theater, you kind of just tend to pick up a little bit more jobs than you want and especially a lot of theater where you're working on a really tight budget, you just kind of end up with a lot of different trades.
So we met there at that theater. I came in as I had just graduated from college. I had a film and art history degree, and I wanted to work with actors. So I went to this theater. I started stage managing there, and then I met Anthony, who had a really awesome idea for a show called El Verde. And that's kind of where we connected. It was just like this melding of aesthetics and just really funny work that I was really inspired by.
Yeah, I had written one play, and then after that, I had met Alex, and I told her that I was working on this series. El Verde is a superhero show that I write and Alex directs. And the story is about a Mexican immigrant who becomes a superhero. And throughout the years we've been doing this show, every time I write it, it's a different adventure. So the superhero will meet a new supervillain. And for the most part, I will mostly design the shows as well. I not only will I write the shows, but also act and write and design, and then Alex directs them.
You guys are a one-team shop. I love it. I love it. So again, I just want to welcome everyone in as they're coming in. We just got started, so we have a lot more conversation to have. Also, we got people in the audience commenting. If you all have any questions or anything you want asked of these two or me, just shoot them in the chat, and we will definitely get them out, and we'll get some of them answered. I'll be jumping back and forth between my questions and the questions that's posted in the chat as they pop up for us. Great. So I want to go ahead and dive into. I'm so excited to learn about what you two are doing now. What is your most recent collaboration?
So it's actually revolves around El Verde. Throughout the series, El Verde he's also not only is he a Mexican immigrant superhero, he's also a married superhero. And we've done adventures where his wife becomes the superhero, and her name is La Naranja. So you have the green and the orange. And Center Theater Group in Los Angeles, we have a friend who works there. His name is Jesus Reyes, and he is the
Jesus is the director of community partnerships at Center Theater Group, and he's been a big advocate of our work. He has a company he had a company with a group of amazing artists called East LA Rep, where we also worked as artists and collaborators. And, he's believed in our work for a long time and was able to give Anthony a commission for a series of community stories that are being produced right now during the pandemic. And it's just a call to create art in this time. And we were able to work on a animated short. So long story to get to. As we know, our stages are closed, and how else we can create. So we worked on an animated short, and it's just funny because I come from film. That's what I went to school for, and I also dabble in it here and there. So this is where all these skills always come in, and how we're able to pivot and continue creating is just like, we can't do stage on a theater, but we have these skills. What can we do? So Anthony drew all the animation on it. I really wouldn't call it animation. It's just
like
what we could do. It's like a motion comic,
yeah.
But was able to sound design for it. I was able to edit the film and then also direct. And we had some incredible actors who were able to COVID-19 safely record lines from their homes and send it to us. But again, pivoting, but also that's just the way that we've been working since the beginning of our partnership is in many elements and in many formats. So we're doing comics, we're doing stage, we're doing video, we're doing social media. It's just always been so much fun to collaborate that way.
Yeah, and as I'm very glad that I've learned the tools that I've needed to learn, because now I'm starting to use them here in this COVID-19 world we're now living in. Besides light designing, I also sound design, and I was able to put all the sound cues together and make it into a little like audio. At first, it was just going to be just drawings, and we were just going to kind of just submit the story, but then we kind of kept taking it one level up and making it into this little like short video that will be coming out soon. The story is La Naranja, which is El Verde's wife. This is a superhero, and she takes on. I was reading about mythical creatures of the Aztec mythology, and she takes on one of the monsters, which is called the Aguizot, which is kind of this big wolf-like creature, and attacks the town, and she fights him, essentially.
I want to see this now. Right now. Show me.
Okay, hold on. Let me push play.
That sounds amazing. I want to, doing it all.
Doing too much.
It's never too much right now. I love the fact that both of you are creating this, but also in a sense, giving opportunities to other people in the industry that would normally just not have those opportunities. So many of us are just not able to work, not able to do anything, we don't have the outreach or we can't collaborate with other people right now because of different situations. But the fact that you're creating these opportunities to make sure we stay fresh and keep doing things and creating, that's amazing. And I want to be in them. I don't even act, and I want to be in them. What are some of the ways that it has shifted in the way you collaborate? Because normally you're able. Well, right now you guys are together, so that's great. But being together like this for pretty much 27, since we're in the middle of a pandemic, it changes even in this way how you collaborate. So what are some of the ways that collaboration has changed pre-COVID, since pre-COVID or post-COVID?
I think
It's not post-COVID.
Yeah.
During COVID.
I mean,
I'm wishing in advance. I'm wishing
I
in
know you
advance.
are. I love it. I'm here for that.
I do miss the sense of like physically being with actors and just other designers and just kind of like playing off everybody and seeing, you know, figuring it all out together. I think that's a great thing about theater, is that, you know, it's one big puzzle and everyone is putting it all together. And I think here now it's more that like, okay, we're checking on each other via webcam or via telephone and phone. And I know that's how old school I am.
It's a different puzzle. It's a different puzzle to figure out. Yeah, and I think there's so much inspiration that happens in between moments, or like just being outside and people watching, that kind of inspire whatever work you're doing. So that inspiration looks differently. And I think because we are together, the time apart, right? Because each individual artist, it's not there all the time, right? So it's again, you're finding ways to inspire yourself. Sometimes you don't have access to space by yourself, but you inspire yourself. You inspired by what's going on. And just the world has changed so much that a lot of times the inspiration doesn't come just because it's just really sad. It's, you know, and allowing time to process all the emotions has been super important to our process. It's just like, we don't have to create. It's okay. There's enough happening in the world. But we can always find ways to check in on each other, as friends, as artists, as all that. But yeah.
And I think also a lot of it has stayed the same as well. As I working on this La Naranja video, I was making essentially sound cues for Alex that I'd had to like have her listen to, and then she gave me notes, and I had to, you know, it's still that's still there in a sense.
I think the thing is that you can't run away with like after the notes. Like I'll just watch as the notes are getting done, which probably is not something enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm also as I do this, I teach college students, and I actually had them write in some questions for you. So hopefully they're watching, because this is one of their assignments. But one of their questions is, what do you do when you are creating and you have notes, and sometimes you don't always agree with the notes? How do you handle that during? And then after you're done with that, let's say meeting or project, still being together, like how do you work through that? How do you handle a relationship and a partnership?
I think a lot of times
then he took a
I mean, make sure this is right.
I mean, there's definitely been moments where we put a theater together, whatever show we're working on, and it's like, I definitely see this either lit this way or this needs to have this specific lighting right here this way. And unfortunately, like Alex and I don't meet on whatever that issue may be or whatever scene. And I think that for us, it's a process of, okay, right now in with all these actors and everyone, we need to just worry more about our time, and whatever this little moment is that we can't really agree on yet, we'll go outside and we'll talk about it afterward and figure it out what it is. And I think a lot of times it's just being clear with each other of how it is, what you saw, what your vision was on this part, and what my vision was on this part. And okay, well then how can we work this together?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very clear about what we bring to the table. And I think a lot of times, not only when I'm working with Anthony, the collaboration is not just as a designer, it's as a playwright. So there's multiple levels of conversation happening there. But we're clear on what we bring to the table, and that the vision is about what services the story, right? So it always comes back to that. Like, it does this moment service this story, and what we're trying to do? And if it doesn't, then easy no. But if it does, it's a yes. And I think in terms of collaboration, or like when you're given notes that you don't agree on, it's great to ask clarifying questions, so that you can come to an agreement. Because I think a lot of times, when you don't, like, a lot of times what my experience has been, and this is outside of Anthony, like, I'll give a note, it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen, and it doesn't happen. And then I'm like, well, when is that change going to be made? Like 5 days later, right? Because there's so many other things happening. And then it's just like, it's deflected. And I think that is just, when I'm working in collaboration, that's not something I put into practice. That's not an environment I want to be in, because it's super toxic. So for us, it's super important to just sit and talk about it, because we also don't want to take it home. Because we're partners in real life, right? And we work together. So we also don't want to take it home, because there's a separation of church and state to some degree. So for us, it's really important to just talk it through and understand, like, the note is there for a reason. Let me explain why. And usually what happens is, once we get the misunderstanding, it's just like, oh, well, we can do this then, and then we could do this, and then we come up with something brilliant, that we would have never come up with had we just, closed ourselves in and not had the conversation.
And I've been very fortunate to work with a lot of directors that are very clear, and and there's a good, like, we get a sense of what we want from each other and what it is that we both clear, like our vision of whatever show we're working on. But at the same time, I've also worked with directors that they want something very specific. And as much as a vision that you bring to the board, or whatever kind of like creativity that you bring as a designer, sometimes it's not what they want. And sometimes that's a hard, like, you as a designer, okay, I just have to give them this and move on and move forward, because it doesn't make sense to be stuck in this little, like, circle of really fighting for something, because at the end of the day, you still have a deadline of opening night.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, you mentioned collaborating with each other, being with each other after that, so having to come home and still deal with that. How are you finding ways to collaborate outside of each other? I know you mentioned a couple of projects you're working on, but outside of those projects, like individually, how are you collaborating with others that might not necessarily be projects you two have together?
Yeah, well, for me, it's really, I know the aesthetic that we have together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very clear of the aesthetic, and I'm very clear about what the product wants to be and look like, and the kind of projects that we want to work together, because it's a lot to be together all the time as partners, and then be together all the time as coworkers. Yeah. So it's very important that all that time be filled, for the most part, with joy, and be working on something that we both believe in and want to spend time building together. So that is like one of the big things of, like, Anthony, do you want to work on this? And he'd be like, no. And then I'm like, cool. Right. And sometimes, sometimes I get assigned designers. Sometimes I'm going into a project that is preconceived by somebody else. And those things just come with their own set of people, of things that aren't really like, I can't really shift them to some degree. But then also, those aren't things I tell Anthony about, and he's like, I wouldn't want to do that anyway. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
So we're very specific about what we like to work with together, because of the amount of time that's going to be for us together.
And also for me, I'm part of a writing group, and I take writing classes. So that's kind of my own thing that I like. I'm still trying to get my writing done as well. So that's something of my own little world that I still, that's still my own little, like, collaboration with others.
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of questions. I'm so happy this chat is like, it's, I don't know how to describe it, just saying popping, because that's the word I would use. So we have a question from Taylor. And that, I guess it kind of ties into the question I've asked. How are disagreements handled when developing a concept for a show? So just, I guess, go explain a little bit in more detail how you might handle some disagreements you might have, or give us an example, maybe.
I don't know. This is a little bit to like the pre-work that's done.
Yeah.
The pre-work to be on the right project, to understand what we're bringing to the table. And it's not to say that there's never been a disagreement. Like I can remember one time where we were doing Marriage of Quince, and then it was this time traveling. Like the character on stage has to time travel. And she has all this dialogue leading up to this time travel, and I'm just like, I just want to get to the time travel. Can we just cut? Like, can we just figure out how to shorten this? And then it's Anthony who has this vision for what he wants to see on stage, not only as a designer but as a playwright. Like, there's a vision, and again, I'm just coming back to how much is this servicing the story versus how much is this servicing what you thought you wrote, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's very, at least when entering this partnership, it's like I'm very aware of what is brought to the table and what I bring to the table. Like, if you want me here for a gig, you know why I'm here, whatever that is. So I think that is pretty clear within our working relationship, is like, I'm not going to cut your dialogue because I don't want people to hear the extraordinary dialogue you've written. I'm cutting it because it's not servicing the story. And I think that's just something I use just anywhere I work, but mostly when I'm working with Anthony, like I know who I'm working with. And I think that's super important.
I'm trying to think in terms of light designing for Alex. I think we've been pretty good. Like, there's never been a like, this is what the show should look like, and we both kind of have an agreement of this is what the show looks like. I've had instances with other directors where it's like, for me, my big thing is light your actors. Like, I'm always about like, I don't care like how dark and dim you want the show. I want to be able to see the actors. And yes. I've had moments. There's like with directors where they want it like dim and gloomy for most of the show, and it's like. And I'll try to give it to them, and then at some point they'll realize throughout like the tech week that it's really dim and dark, and then it's like, okay, well, it's one of those where it's like, you can't do that, I told you, but you know, you try to compromise and try to show them like, okay, this is the stage dim the way you want it, but this is what I was thinking, and it is a give and take.
I love that. I love the term service the play, service the story as well. And like the actors, because it's a play where you can't see anyone.
Yeah.
You want to be, if they're on stage, they need to be shown. Not to mention, you know, when they walk, it'd be nice to see where you're walking to.
I'm always that one guy in the audience that, like, whatever play I go see, I'm always looking up to see the different lights, and I always go, okay, why can't I see this actor right now? And I'll look up and I'll see what the light's hitting them. Yeah.
Oh, that's a typical light designer watching a show.
Yeah.
Wow, we have first of all, we have some amazing questions that I'm gonna go ahead and ask some of these. Even though I have some I want to ask, but I want to make sure that the audience gets to hear answers to your questions. So the next one up we have is from Isabel. How do you distinguish between your roles in collaboration, if at all?
Yeah, I immediately think of, and I think this is something that I've had to learn the hard way. I think that at some point, because Alex directs a lot of my work that I've written, at some point I need to step aside. I'm no longer the writer, and I'm now either the actor or the designer, and that's my role. And to let whatever part you're working on to just move forward and focus on that. if something isn't working in the script at some point and whatever monologue or whatever needs to be fixed later, that can be worked. But I think you need to have your head adjusted to the job you're working on at the task. And I think that's kind of been the journey for me as far as like trying to take on too much. Because you have this idea of what your show wants to be and you want to have total control of everything. But at the same time, you need to understand that you're going to like tire yourself out.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, I think for me, it's really been about phases, like phasing in, right? Like, okay, you're a playwright up to this point, and now you're an actor because I need you to do the work of an actor. Because all of those roles are very important, bring so much to the table. And just to clarify, like, we're not like two people who like just put up one show all by ourselves. Like, this is by choice. Like, we started off doing like really small storefront theater. So we just learned to do everything because that's what was needed for us to get the show done. But as we began to define the roles that we truly like enjoy, like where we spend most of our time, we also like tried not to shut down the other creative aspects of everything else. So like there are shows where Anthony will be like, I don't want to light design this show. And I'm like, cool. And there are shows where he's like, I want to do this one. And I'm like, awesome. So that's one way that we also like define our roles is by like having a clear conversation of like, what do you want to do? Or like, what do you want to learn from this go around? Like, what do you want to get your hands on? So we're also like finding ways to create opportunities to continue creatively growing, because then it gets boring.
Yeah, and I think for me, like being a writer and a designer, it's like I write with design in my head, and I'm like, oh, I see these kind of lights, and it's been very much like the whole point of theater is collaboration, and it's cool to have other designers and see what they can do with your work. And I've been so like I need to grab hold of every single little thing, and I've learned very much that like, no, it's cool to hand your script off to another lighting designer to see how much fun they can have. And there's possibilities that you would never even seen before in that work.
So I'm going to stay on this train of talking about concepts and collaboration, even though I kind of want to bounce off to another, but I want to get all these questions out because they all tie into each other. This is from Brandon. When do you finalize the concept for your show? And how do you know when that's the concept you want to stick with? How do you know when it's ready?
Opening night.
You don't, I know. Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of working together, right? It's that we're like there for the building of the entire thing, right? Like everything, like even as the script is being written, like we're in each other's orbits. And we're constantly being inspired and constantly being like, oh, did you see that new Lady Gaga video? Love it. Like, how can that come into it? But respectfully, yes, like once we go into rehearsals, things are pretty solid at that point because we need to now pass this on to our actors and our other designers. And we're not like switching stuff up on them. But we also always leave room for collaboration. So if there is something cool that a designer wants to bring in, the conversation is going to happen. Like it's always from a place of yes. So there are times that even like on an opening night, we'll add one last thing to the set. That we chatted with everyone and be like, everyone cool with that? And they're like, yeah, I won't put it on. I
think it's also that like, because we've worked on shows that aren't those stuff that I write. We worked on other people's plays, and I think as long as we both have an understanding of what is this play about, like just kind of very simple, like basics. What is the message of this show? What is this play about? What is it trying to convey to the audience? And as long as we're all kind of on the same page, then I think everything else kind of falls into place as far as the design and everything else. Yeah.
But a lot, like Anthony mentioned, when I'm directing a play that he's written, a lot of the design elements are already in there once we like do a first reading of the script because he's writing with design in mind. So like colors, images, costume, mood, mise en scène. It's all in there. And I just the wonderful thing about the partnership is that I've been able to orbit him while he's been writing. So come first day of rehearsal, I already have a sensibility about what we're creating together.
That's like a dream to be able to sit in on that side of the process. Speaking as a director, that's a director's dream. It's like I don't have to pick the brain of the playwright, and I don't have to be like, oh, I wonder what he meant or she meant or they meant by this. I already know because I was looking over the shoulder saying, oh, that's what you're doing. But no,
that's the choice you're gonna go with.
even for shows we
I don't know about that. I'm gonna go make dinner. Bye.
Even for the shows that we worked on where the playwright, where we don't have access to the playwright, I think there's still we understand what we both want. Like there's still that communication of like we have an understanding of what this play is about.
Yeah, and I think because that's we're not working together because we're partners. We're working together because we are creative partners. So like I enjoy the sensibility, the aesthetic, the humor that brings to the table. So that's why we are in collaboration. The relationship is just an extra plus. But it's like that. I think when you're finding your collaborators, that's what you want. You want a shared language so that then you can trust that they're going to do what they need to do because you have a shared vision. And you can let them go wild, right? You can let them do their thing because we're all having this conversation about the same aesthetic. And then you're not always starting from zero. Because that's something like as a director, when you partners in every show, for me, it's just like I'm always starting at zero. And then we build that relationship while the show is happening, while it's getting built. And there's something quite nice. As you mentioned, like it's quite a dream to be like not having to start from zero and be like, what can we do this time?
I'm hoping to one day have at least a show I could do that on. We'll see.
Me and you, Yolanda, we're gonna do a show. Don't worry, I got you.
You got me. Great.
I
love it. Okay, we have a question from Chuck. Chuck asks, "Do you use commanding images when designing?"
I think it kind of goes back to what Alex was saying as far as referencing of things. When they read a play and we're doing someone else's work, and we go, oh, this reminds me of, this is like Sergio Leone movies. This is like the Wild West. Okay, cool. I get what that means. I'm going to start doing my research and start watching Sergio Leone movies. I'm going to start watching Old West films. Like, I think we really much have a sense of, like, because we understand pop culture, it's like, okay, we know what to reference. And I think those are the images in my head that I go, okay, cool. How can I bring what I see on screen into a kind of stage format?
And I think just the reference library that we have in our heads is so huge. Like we're constantly refilling the reference library of images and sounds, constantly. Like every day there's images that go in. And it doesn't just it's not just contemporary artwork. Like, funny enough, like I studied film and art history, so that vast knowledge and library of that imagery comes into every show, every production, conversation, so that's kind of like we can easily go, oh yeah, a fistful of dollars. That's what we're trying to go for. This lighting needs to be like fistful of dollars, and bam, it's like a shared language that we can bring in for that type of work.
I think going off of that, everything that's happening today is constantly something we can reference. This is a great segue to something I wanna jump into now. We've seen so many changes in society just in 1 year. Like so many shifts, so many things has happened. It's almost overload. Like we've got a new president. We've had everything that happened on the Capitol. we've got police brutality, we've got Black Lives Matter, we've got rights of indigenous people being taken away, land being taken away and used for anything, everything that it's not supposed to be used for. Everything is happening right now. So how do you harness that? How do you, because as storytellers, we have to tell those stories. And how do you make sure that although we have these creative stories that we want to tell, we still have to tell the stories of what's happening now, because everybody doesn't have access the way they used to. Art is used to give that access. So how do you make sure that you're tapping into that without being overloaded or re-traumatizing yourselves?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was not even a question that I said, but it kind of
that was a session. Let's all sit around and talk about this. No, I think the thing that you mentioned last is, how do you not re-traumatize yourself? Right? Because as BIPOC, as Latinx voices, like, this is happening like every day, right? Every day there's something about the border, or there's something about the crossing, there's something about immigration, there's and not only that, there's just everything else in the world happening right now, especially in this country, like, but it's also just so important to be informed. It's like 100% important to stay informed and to know what's happening in the world. Not just to continue to scroll endlessly and just fill your mind with the repetition of images that are harmful. And I think for us, it's so important in the work that we try to put out that there is joy, that there is humor, that we are shifting the narrative from the single story. And as Latinx voices, like, we're not just immigrants. We're not just rape stories. We're not just all these buckets that they put us in. So
narrative.
Yeah, we're constantly thinking, like, that's not us. That's not me. That's not my story. That's not my experience. I'm first generation. That's not my experience here. And to uplift that story, I think is what we do. And I think a lot of times, knowing what's happening in the world informs everything, informs all of that narrative. And I think that part is super important. It's just, you need to know where you stand. You need to know what you're saying. You need to know where you are. And I think a conversation we had really early on was just like, we need to know what we stand for too, because that is so important. Is like, that's going to show up in our work, but we need to know who we are and what we stand for. And I think then it begins to really inform the stories that we tell and how we tell them and how they shift constantly.
Yeah, I also, to add to that, I think from the writing classes I've taken and from the writing groups I've joined, I'm very fortunate to meet a lot of BIPOC writers. And I think whether you say to write whatever's going on or not, like, write it, people will write what's going on. And I think I'm very fortunate that I've seen a lot of great writers empower themselves and empower BIPOC characters. And I think that's just keep doing that. Just keep empowering yourself in whatever way creatively you can. And, that's just one step forward.
And also to know when to not tell a story. When a story is not yours to tell, and to really question why you're interested in telling that story. And if it's really something important, then find the writer, find the director, make space, become an advocate for that voice. But you don't need to tell all the stories. that's and I think sometimes that's really important. And when you're getting this barrage of imagery and information, especially the way you get information now, right? Through Twitter, through TikTok, through Facebook, like, you want to activate. You always want to activate. And it's really hard not to, but I think it's important to just stop, breathe, and think, like, is it your story to tell? And if it's not, totally okay. But also, if you have if you have any type of ability to open a door or to become an advocate for a voice that's the story you want to tell, make sure you become that advocate, but don't tell people stories like that. That is just, I'm gonna be quiet.
That's a different kind of conversation we have to have. But I agree. I just want to acknowledge artists at play. I think we asked the same question at the same time. How do we harness all that? Yeah, that has been happening. But I think your answer that covered it. That you told us exactly how. So you mentioned being BIPOC artists, BIPOC practitioners. And you mentioned a lot of challenges we face, and making sure we tell our story, and then finding advocates and finding those who, even though it might not be our story to tell, making sure we find the right storyteller, the right director, the right designer to tell those stories, and just giving them an avenue, giving them a platform, making sure that we create space for them. Which brings up working in PWIs. And for those who don't know, PWIs are predominantly white institutions, not just colleges, but it's PWIs in any institution. There's theaters, they're all over the place. How is it working in a PWI versus working in a more culturally specific institution? Have you worked in both? And what are some of the main differences then and now, being more with the world trying to be more socially conscious? I'm not even going to say they are, because, but trying to be more. What's the big differences?
I think one of many, but one that comes up in my mind right now is having to explain our work at PWIs, not for clarification, but for validity. Like, are you supposed to be here? Like, tell me more about a superhero show. Why is that? Is that a kid show? Like, there's so many ways in which our work becomes minimized under the umbrella of like, explain it to me. And I feel like we do, and we as a group, but myself, like, I just feel like there's so much time, extra time spent on convincing people to come on board, to join us on this trip, and a trip that has proven to be successful. Like, we spend so much time trying to convince people of the story we're telling, and I think that's one part. And then we spend a whole chunk of other energy convincing these white institutions of like why the audiences that we're presenting to need to also reflect the people that are on stage and the people that are creating this work. And that's exhausting. It's exhausting. And I think when we work at culturally specific theaters, that's not the conversation. And we're not, and again, this goes back to the starting at zero. When we work at like culturally specific theaters, we're not starting at zero. Usually people have brought us in because they get our humor, they get the show, they get the concept, they get who we are. They see us as people, not as like tokens for a season. And that's just you're having a different conversation, a completely different conversation. And that is what I wish for every artist of color. Like, I get so tired trying to explain why I need to be in a space. And then as a woman of color, like, I get so tired of being undermined or questioned or asked in front of, my cast and crew, whether that's what I really meant or not. It's just, and I describe it too, like, I get so tired of having to be big. Like, I have to become big to be in a space. And I think when we are working in collaboration, that's something beautiful about having even if it's one person that knows you in a PWI, to be there with you, like it's just, you know, you're coming in together. So like at least you have someone to witness, you know, like they can't always protect you, but there's a witnessing of like, did I just have to explain that again? What el verde mean? It means the green. And, you know, like that constant explanation of why you're in a place is just, it sucks.
Oh, you opened up a whole lot about another conversation that needs to be had and discussed on a platform like this, because so many of us experience that same thing, and so many times we can't pinpoint why we feel that way, or we've been taught that we're wrong to feel that way, or what we're feeling is not valid, or it's not, that's not really what's happening, when it's like we're getting gaslighted.
Like that was a microaggression that would just like you went.
It's just, there's no, so many of us are trapped in that situation. I'll leave it at that. So many of us are trapped.
To add to that, I think I've been very fortunate to work in organizations with people of color, but then, you know, for the few moments where, or a few productions where I'm the only person of color in the tech crew, or the only person of color that's the designer. And then you do kind of like, you do feel a little out of place. And it makes you feel out of place, and then all of a sudden, I guess the imposter syndrome kicks in, and then you're like, should I be here? And then you're trying to convince yourself, no, you should be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our time has gone by so fast, because I was supposed to stop at 15 minutes till the hour and be like, oh, we got 15, but we are past that. So we literally have less than 13 minutes. But I feel like we just started talking. So I'm going to try to fit in a couple of more questions. And again, audience, if you have any more, please send them my way. I'm going to try to get to as many of them as I can. So I'm going to talk about I'm trying to find a good way to segue. But so
just drop it.
I'm gonna drop it. What do you think the future looks like in theater? In the face of COVID, in the face of social unrest, political unrest, American white theater, what do you think is next? How do we move forward? How do we make sure that our voices are heard and understood, and we are not silenced, and we get to create the work that we want to create and need to create in the face of all of this, when so much is happening that it seems at times triggering and hard and traumatizing? How do we move forward? I know there's a lot to ask. Solve our problem, but what are some of the ways do you think is a good way to move forward, especially moving forward in collaborative process? Like, great, we can work with each other, but how do we reach out across the aisle and work for a better way?
Yeah, it's hard because we're in it. So it's hard to think of like what the future is, because we're like in the thick of it, you know, and working at a PWI where like these things are happening. And white America and white American theater is so dominant in like what is shown, right? It just, it always, it's what we see, right? It's what we see, it's what we hear, it's the songs people sing and all that jazz. But I'd say from my own journey, like it's been a long journey, and I've known you for a long time, Yolanda, and we started as young leaders of color at TCG, and that's where we met. And a lot of the work that we did there was about knowing self, knowing self, knowing what I bring to the table, understanding my values, understanding that values are not to be negotiated with, that these are the things I stand for, and being clear with myself of what are the things I stand for, what I'm not going to allow to happen. And I think a lot of this time is asking us to be brave in spaces where we don't usually associate that with. Like, I don't associate being brave at a team meeting, right? On a Monday morning team meeting at 9, but like, somehow now I have to put that hat on and be brave and like say no, because the thing I've learned in the years is that when I go for a job interview, I'm not being interviewed by the job, I'm interviewing the job. And I'm seeing if that's a space that I want to spend time, because these institutions and organizations monetize on the color of my skin, the way my name sounds, and the thoughts and cultural experiences that I have. And they need me to legitimize the work that they're doing. And once I was able to like to shift this mind thinking that I'm not being given a favor, I'm actually here. And especially we work in this field that's filled with nonprofits, right? I'm a taxpayer. Yeah, the circle is round. You have to make sure that you are making space for people and voices of other cultural experiences. And if you're not, then I need you to say that. So I think being able to say that in some spaces has been really scary, but being able to call it out when it's happening. And that's why it's just like, I really do hope that, as hard as it is to not want to be validated by white American theater, because we're just in a system of white supremacy, right? Like, we want to be perfect wherever we show up, because we want to show that we're the best. Fight that, and to like say that's not the way to work, and to just create those practices in the way that we work, and that when we show up in predominantly white spaces, that we are requesting, demanding that work schedules be different, that this is how we work as a team, and this is how we want the environment to be built. But it's really scary. It's really scary. But I do just hope that moving forward, we are clear with our worth and our value, and we will accept nothing less. And that when we see an ally or an advocate asking for that we're there to stand behind and be like, I got you. Don't worry. Don't be afraid. I got you. Because that's the scariest thing. Like, when you're in a space and you're the only one. And I know I've been the only one a lot of times, and you mentioned that too. Like, it's hard when you're the only one and you think that's the only opportunity you're ever going to get.
Yeah. I think, I think a lot of things, but I do recognize that we're coming up on time, but I do want to go ahead and try to get this last question in, but I'm going to tie it into my last question as well. It's from Isabel. How do you help relieve the imposter syndrome besides just positive self-talk? But I'm going to tie that in with another question or with another statement. I guess it's question. What is some advice, because this will go with that, for these young artists coming up, these next round of young artists that are coming through, that are dealing with imposter syndrome, feeling like this is not where I'm supposed to be? What are some of the advice or some words that you can give them as they are becoming our next practitioners, leaders in this industry?
Know that for BIPOC designers and just anyone in the field of theater, that know that like you're working very hard to get where you're to move forward, and know that means something. And know that other people who are higher up in the field, they probably didn't work as hard. So you deserve it. Like, and I know it's a lot easier to say you deserve it, but it is something that it's very true. It's very true that you deserve a place at the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, or I would also say that the imposter syndrome is funny, because sometimes it gets mixed up with like your instinct, and sometimes it's your instinct telling you this is not a safe place.
Mm,
Get out of here.
I
You know,
never thought of that.
and I think, and this is just my experience. I could be totally wrong. I'm not a therapist. But like, listen to yourself. It's just listen to what, listen and hear to what's going on. You know, there's a lot of times where I've had to be big, like I said, in a space, and then I was made to feel like I didn't belong in that space. And then now I look back and I'm like, why did I want to be in that space to begin with? It was so toxic and so much trauma was created there. So I think, yes, like we deserve to be at every table, and we need to keep building our own tables, because
Yeah.
we just like
Wait, pause. Say that again.
we just need to make our own tables, and our own tables don't need to look like tables. They could look like anything we want. Because again, we are trying, like, I grew up in, my journey in this field has been through the white lens. Like the regional theaters where I've had to direct, when I've been questioned about a choice, it's again because it doesn't fit in with the white lens, and I'm like, that's not how my people tell stories. Booyah! Like, what are you gonna tell me? So I just think like sometimes we should find ways to get out of spaces too. Like, nobody said that we need to suffer to be making theater. It's not tied together, and it took me just a really long time to realize that, and also to free myself from that. I think when I was able to be like, these are the things I value. I value family, I value transparency, and I value self, working on myself. So if a project does not meet those things, all three of those things, I don't need to be there, because there will be another door, and there will be another space, and there will be another collaborator to do work with that means something. Because I think, going back to what you said, in this time, we need to make art that means stuff. It means something. It can't be just anything.
Yeah. I don't know a better way to end this. That's a perfect ending.
Love you, Yolanda.
I love you guys too. We are right at time. I want to thank Anthony and Alejandra and the audience. You guys, you gave us some great questions. I have a million more, but I'm friends with them, so I can ask them. But there is a way for you all to reach out to them. Their websites will be put up for you guys. There they are. Please reach out to them.
Subscribe and click.
Subscribe and click. Definitely, hit them up for work, because again, they're artists, and like them, we all need to be paid for our work. Yeah, all the time. No free work.
No free work.
All right. I hope you all would join us next week, February the 19th, for our community conversations as professional from the Asian American community talk about their careers in theater. You can also make connections at our virtual annual conference being held March 8th through 12th, 2021. And USITT's Collaborations Conversation and Community Conversations are made possible through the support of membership dollars and the Tanisha Jefferson Fund for Inclusion. You can find out more about all of these things and everything happening at USITT at usitt.org. Thank you again. I am your host, Yolanda Williams, and we will see you next time.
Yay!
Bye.